Rav Nachum's going to get you if you don't.
I did post the last one on the YouTube channel. So I wanted to just say something. I think that I heard this from Gila Kletenik, who taught when I took Esser Veheter with Rav Landis a couple of years ago. She taught the Birya course and the Siman and the Shulchan Aruch. And she made an interesting comment that kind of we danced around, but was that up until now we've been doing, you know, like bitul and how you can be mevatel things, or how things can be mevatel rather. We don't not lechatchila necessarily, but and now we're hitting like, here are all the exceptions to this. You know, here are the things that actually have no bitul, and we're going to hit 3 simanim in a row of these 3 or 4, 3 I believe it is, of these categories, and Birya is the first. So. With that, I wanted to kind of start out with, so what is a Birya, which is Seif Aleph. So I wanted to review it. So we're going to start, we'll stay in the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Kuf, Seif Aleph. And so I just wanted to first just start, maybe someone will just read the Shulchan Aruch, like the Gemara, like the Torah, starts out not with a concept, but with examples, right? In fact, the Gemara never gives a rule really, which is part of our problem here. So I just wanted to look at the examples. So someone maybe read the very beginning, and
I'm happy to read.
Go for it.
Birya dahainu kegon nemala of tameh v'gira nasheh ve'ever min hachai uveitza sheyesh ba'efrach ukayotze bahem afilu be'elef lo batla.
Great.
So you want me to translate?
Sure.
It just proper nouns.
Exactly. But maybe actually the better thing is what are the exceptions? Like what are we coming to exclude? La fuke ma, or ma, stay in Aramaic. La fuke mai, you know, for each of these categories, for each of these members of the list.
Well, he hasn't gone into the exclusion part yet.
Yes.
Here he's just taking things that the Gemara and the Torah list. The exclusion part happens later.
Yeah. So no, I agree. I was just going to say, like, for instance, with some of these, right, the of tameh, we're going to see this, right, but as opposed to an of tahor, cannot be a birya, right? Is so, and you know,
and a beit sheyesh ba as opposed to a beit sheyesh ba tipat dam.
Exactly. So good. Okay, so with that, right now we just have category. We just have a list. We don't have actually like a general rule. This is like the, but so then here the Shulchan Aruch is going to give us 4 rules for a birya, essentially, right? If I count them correctly. So maybe keep reading. That'll be a good.
Yeah. Ein lo din birya el im ken hu davar shiabo chayut.
I think she
la puke chita.
Great. Keep going. Sorry. Yeah, keep going.
La puke chita achat shel isor v'chen sarich shia davar she'asor mitchilat briyato la puke of tahor shenit naval v'shor haniskal v'chen sarich shia davar shalem she'im yechalek ein shemo alav la puke chalev v'chen sarich shia shalem.
Great. So I count that as 4 rules. It has to have chiyut, right? Whatever that means, some sort of life force or something that, you know, as opposed to plants don't have that. That's I think the best I can do with what that means, because apparently Ever Min Achai has that. Apparently Gita Nasheh has that. But it has to be its isur has to be halalav from the beginning of its creation as that entity, right? It has to be something that only holds its name when it is whole and does no longer hold its name when it's split up. And it has to be itself whole, right? It can't be a part of an ant. It has to be a whole ant, for instance. So, and I think just to remind us, right, that this was actually a combination of 2 different shitot that we had, both between, I think it was it the Rashba and the Ran? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and
the Ran.
And the Gra I actually have it listed here, and in Vav, and I wanted to take a look at that. He actually makes an interesting comment about that. So maybe Yavne, or Isaac, one of you want to read Sif Katan Vav in the Biur Hagra?
Ve'ein lo din kule?
Yeah.
Okay. Kamashe Katav Haran, שלושה תנאים צריך חיות, מתחילת בריאתו שיהא שלם, and that is a cat on my Shulchan Aruch.
No problem. So,
שיהא שלם,
yeah.
אבל תוספות וראש לא הצריכו חיות, והצריכו שיהא אם יחלך כולי, אלא בשם, whoever Yod Mem is.
Yesh Mefarshim.
Oh, אלא בשם יש מפרשים, כתבו כמו שכתב הר"ן, ופסח בשולחן ערוך לכולה כל התנאים.
Yeah. I really just want, what I'm really interested is maybe summarize and then give us the last couple words there. So.
Okay, so basically, the Ron says there are three stipulations.
Great.
You need chayut. It needs to be a birya from like the moment it's created, and it needs to be an entire thing. But the Tosafot and the Rosh didn't require chayut, but they did require that, you know, when you divide it, it be called something else. Mm-hmm. But there are other mefarshim who write according to the opinion of the Rosh, and they posking like the Shulchan Aruch.
I think.
Sorry,
I'm going to back you up there, right? That, but the Rosh and so forth, and the Tosfot wrote, but there are those people who say like the Ran said, right? That they say that. But the Shulchan Aruch, how does he piresh?
So I find this weird wording. The Shulchan Aruch paskins,
yeah,
lakula,
yes,
on all these requirements.
It's lakula because he has kol hatanaim, right? They each have, there's three, and there's two that overlap between the two shitot, and one that they're in disagreement about. And what the Shulchan Aruch says, instead of deciding which three he's going to choose, he chooses all four. And
but see, that to me doesn't seem like a kula.
Well, of course.
Well, I mean, well, okay. So it depends. I guess it's a kula in the sense that like fewer things become birya, and therefore fewer things are never a batel, and therefore it's easier to have food that's kosher.
I think that is what the Ra means there. Someone else can clarify it, but I'm pretty sure that's what he means by that, is that because we're now up to 4 different categories that are necessary, 4 different qualities, let's call it that you're necessary to be a birya. It shortens the list of what's a birya.
Cool.
So I think that's just, you know, and so it's just an interesting move that the Shulchan Aruch pulls there, which I don't know how much, you know, the truth is, and I've been racking kind of my brain. It didn't take very long, but I racked my brain a little bit of like, how does this change things? And I don't know if it does much, because at the end of the day, I think really our birya is less about those qualifications that you need and more about the list that we have, truth be told, right? It's like, is it an insect? Okay, a whole insect is a birya. It might a little bit, if it's missing its legs, for instance, might be an interesting point to that. And that's right. And I just want to point out that, right, if it has to be shalem, right, if it's an ant, but you pulled off a section of the ant or you ground it up or so forth, it's no longer a birya, and it can be batel. So, and this is why, you know, you do see this where, especially with a lot of things with vegetables, that if you're putting it in a, you know, you checked, but you're not sure or whatever, and the whole thing about whether you can do this lechatchila is I'm not going to get into, but like you put it into a smoothie, you put it in your blender and you ground up the vegetables, then there's no worry anymore, potentially, because everything's ground up and there's no birya left in there.
So we should never need smoothie shops. All our smoothie shops don't need to be hechshered.
Well, I'm not going to go there. But there might be less chashash at birya. Let's put it that way. So, yeah.
Well, there's no chashash birya, but there is sort of an issue of mevatel isur l'chachila.
And there's a whole thing about derabanan, which we're going to get into in a second, and also things about what is b'diavad, if it's like a bunch of non-Jews making smoothies, but you know that it's kosher. But I'm not going to get into all the issues around that. Number one, I'm not sitting in it well enough at the moment, and second of all, I think that's like a very difficult set of halachot. But good.
What was the additional issue besides birya that Noam was saying?
Oh, I think it's mevatel isur lechatchila, right? Is that what you said, Noam? So, but with that, I want to look at the Ber Hatev, who's going to quote the Taz here, about what level Isur the Birya is. If you look at the Ber Hatev, it's, how far is it? It's his first comment on this Siman, but it's like halfway through. He says, V'chatav bataz. Someone want to read for us? Yavni, you haven't read it. If you can find that.
Yeah, I'm just finding it. וכתב בתז, דדין כל דברים החשובים דאינם בטלים, הווה רק מדרבנן, ונפקא מינה לספק יהווה דבר חשוב, או לא הווה ספקא דרבנן ובטל. אבל
I just stop there. I just want to, this is the point I really want to, and I want to read it a little bit differently. He says, V'nafka mina l'safek, ihave devar chashuv olo, have sfeka derabanan uvatel, right? And so, right, he says all these categories we're about to encounter, including this one, of things that are chashuv and therefore not batel, that's a derabanan level isur. And so if we have a safek about, does something fit into this category or not, then it's a sfek derabanan and therefore it is batel. Which might, I'm not sure, I didn't see if anyone says this, it might be why the Shulchan Aruch is more comfortable adding, combining the categories and having 4 lekula, because he thinks this is a derabanan isur and therefore is willing to be more makil about it in general. I don't know, it's a guess. So, good. Any thoughts on that before we go on to Sif Bet? I'm not going to worry too much about the Ramaz comment on Gita Nashet. The truth is, unless any of us is a shochet, which I think we have someone in the class who is, but I am not. I couldn't tell you a Gita Nashet from any other Gid, so I'm not going to try and go into there. The main thing with Sif Bet, and I don't think we necessarily have to look into it so deeply, just is that, well, maybe someone can tell me the difference between the Birya Mamash and the Tam of the Birya. Someone want to just make a comment about that and B-Tool?
The time of the birya is just like the time of anything else.
Great. Yeah.
Only the Moshe birya that has any special status.
Mm-hmm. So, right, if you drop a birya into soup, let's pretend like a fly falls into my soup. The fly is not batel, but let's say I can remove the fly somehow. Either I see it, or maybe I can strain it, whatever it may be. The tongue that the fly gives is batel, potentially, assuming there's enough soup in there to be 60-1 against, the size of the fly, or also potentially, exactly, maybe all insects are pagum. Tam leaf gum, which is an interesting point that I think I haven't seen anywhere that spells this out, but I think it's kind of obvious, is that even though often in these cases the birya is pogem, right? It nonetheless is not batel in itself. So good. That's all I have on Sif Bet, unless somebody has anything more. And then Gimel and Dalet, I think, are a little bit more like Tachlis in some ways. Gimel is really a continuation of Bet, but so maybe we'll read Gimel and Dalet inside. Someone, Noam, we're back to you. Go for it. Read Gimel for us.
Sure. Kedera shel marak shenafal im birya v'nevda asor hakol. So a pot of soup, in which a birya fell and then it got lost, like you can't find the birya in the soup anymore, the whole thing is forbidden.
Great. So, and the Shach, in a very short comment, he gives us a qualification of this, though. So
that you can strain it.
Someone said you could strain it, I think, right?
Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly what he says. He says that if you can't strain it, this is the case. If you can strain it, then you can put it through a strainer. Like what's the not such a big deal. Well, I don't know. Maybe it depends if it's chunky soup versus a soup that you've ground up all the parts. A liquidy soup, is that what we call that? I don't know what the right term is, but so yeah, that's an important part of this. And then finally, Dalid, which I think is where birya shows up the most often in the modern world. I don't know about you guys. I think that, insects do happen in kitchens, right? That they fall into soups and stuff, but probably less than they did in the ancient world. I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But, vegetables still have bug problems. This is not it's been a thing throughout history, and it's still, I have definitely found bugs in broccoli and cauliflower and in other things as well. So someone maybe read the rule, or maybe, let's read it inside. It's short. So Daled, Isaac, you want to read?
Sure. ירקות מבושלות שנמצאו בהם 3 תולעים. הירקות אסורים, אבל מי השלקות מסנן ומותרים. וכן הבשר ירחצנו ויבדקנו ומותר. Okay, so vegetables that have been cooked, like boiled, and you find 3 bugs in them. The vegetables themselves are aser, but the water that you boiled them in, all you have to do is strain it, and then it's okay. It's permissible. And meat that was cooked with it as well, you wash it, rinse it probably, and then you check it, and then it's okay.
Yeah.
The thing that I found really interesting about this, that I was kind of slightly side-eye about when we were discussing it in Shir, was we say we find 3 bugs in the Yerakot, right?
Yep.
But we're sort of discussing this soupy, weird mush of vegetables. So when we find the bugs in the Yerakot, it's not necessarily clear to me that they originally came from the Yerakot. So they could have come from the basar, right? So it seems to me like part of this is a desire to see. Part of this seems financial to me, in the sense that, like, if we can assume that it comes from the vegetables, that's a much cheaper loss than losing meat, especially at the time that this is written. I mean, even now, but like, especially when people like really didn't eat meat very often. And it seems like there's a built-in kula there.
It's interesting. I don't know if that's the case or not. I can tell you that I think the vegetables are just harder to clean, to make sure you get rid of bugs from, right? Vegetables have
meat the thing. Yeah.
What was that?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I say vegetables have, more hiding places than anything else. Sure. Is I think part of the problem. I think it's an interesting shita. I don't know, and it'd be interesting to see if someone says that it's, this is about, we definitely do have in like Hefsed Merubah cases where especially Derabanan stuff can be, there's no gezerah there. But I don't know the answer in this case. But vegetables are just, in my own experience, there's just my own, kind of like, the mitziut of the world that I live in, vegetables have more hiding places for bugs than most other foods do. Not all vegetables, right? And this is why I've seen in some communities I've lived in, Seattle. In fact, the Seattle Vat has historically, I don't know what it's like now, it was historically incredibly machmir about this.
They are currently just as ridiculous.
Yeah, they would like just say like, just don't eat broccoli, right? Essentially was their, not don't check broccoli for an hour, not check.
They banned blackberries.
Oh, yes, berries have been one that is, blackberries in particular.
And strawberries is the Lakewood Chumrah, where you don't eat strawberries there.
Yeah, so it's so yeah, that there are places where they don't check vegetables at all. They just throw them away essentially, or don't eat them. They don't buy them in the first place, or they buy very specialized ones that were, I don't exactly know what happens in the growing of them, that they make sure that there are no bugs, but so, or they make them all into smoothies, but yeah. So I can't answer. I think Rav Nahum made a comment, and I think it was him, and I think it was important that the reason we're talking about cooked vegetables, number one, so then you can include all the other stuff with it, but second, because cooked vegetables in particular are really hard to like tear apart and take the bugs out or wash them out at that point.
You wonder how this applies to like vegetables like potatoes or other things like beans or.
Yeah. So I mean, there is, right. And one of the main things we get with this seif that I think is actually the really important halachic point is the idea of chazaka, right? Something has a chazaka of not having bugs or having bugs. And that's what we rely on. And so like, I remember I heard once, this is like a shiur that was given at YU I was listening to, but can you eat an apple in the dark? Like maybe there's a bug in the apple. Apples have a chazakah that most apples, generally don't have bugs in them. They do happen, so you can assume from the chazakah you can eat it. At least this is what this one Rav, I don't remember who it was, made the statement of. So it's the same thing. And there is a debate, by the way, here. Just people should know this. You can look in the Beratev Vav. I believe it's also in the Taz, in also Vav, that there's a debate between the Bach and everybody else, where the Bach thinks a chazakah only takes 2 and not 3. And other people say, no, that's, those are particular cases in the Gemara where we're talking about 2, but not in this case of Isser v'Heter. But I think that's also important. So any other?
It's like when if you have like broccoli that you found worms in, but there's also potatoes in the soup. Do you have to take out like the potatoes then also?
Exactly. And I do think one of the things in this with the soup is why you have to be mesanen and you have to check the meat, would be because there's an idea that if there were already bugs in the vegetables, they got other places in the soup, and you don't want to accidentally, they're hiding against the piece of meat or something. You don't want to eat them accidentally. So, all right. So with that, unless someone has another comment, I want to share my screen if that's okay. And I wanted to see, maybe quickly, we have a few minutes, look at, I have to find where I put it, but here it is. This is the Haratzvi in your idea, and maybe I'll read. Is that okay? We'll see if I make any mistakes. It says Bedin Tolaim, so the rule of bugs. Uvda have besak shel kemach, right? You have a bag of flour. Shenafu b'yom shishi erev Shabbat Kodesh. So they, before Shabbos, they filtered it. They strained the flour to make sure there were no bugs in it. All right. Ve'achar kach b'yom rishon lakhu mimeno me'at kemach lasot mimeno seor le'achmitz etzeisa. And then they go take on Sunday. They take a little bit of the flour to make some, like, I guess, a sourdough starter or something like that. Avur erech sha'achat le'achar she'irvu seor b'toch isa. Now they've mixed this flour into the dough. Ve'afu mimeno lechem, and they made bread out of it. Lakhu me'asak od kemach. They take more flour out of the bag. They do a second filtering of it. They find 3 small flies in this bag of flour. So you've made challah. You probably had it for Shabbat, and now you find out later that there are bugs in this flour. V'nikarim shirachashu me'achitim shnimsu shama b'toch hacheder. Right, and it was recognized that these bugs, these flies, crawled in from the wheat kernels that were in that same room. So, v'nishalti ma dina lechem, and the question is, well, what about the bread that they made? Can you eat it? All right. V'horiti leheter, and I taught that you can be mutar, that this is mutar, you can eat this, right? Al pi divrei hataz v'magen Avraham shebetolaim de'ati me'alma lo yitchazak b'shlosha zimni, right? That when you have bugs that come not from the vegetables itself, but come from the outside, just, they're around in the room or whatever, that doesn't create a chazaka. That's his first reason. All right. Because there's, if there are bugs around and you find 3 of those bugs in the flour, that doesn't mean the flour is buggy. That means there just happen to be bugs that flew into the flour at the time, I think is the claim there. V'im can have a sfeik sveka, and now we're in a sfeik sveka situation. Dilma lo hayu tolaim betoch kometz haseor, v'dilma nimucho. Right. So there's 2 possibilities. Either, right, because we don't have a chazakah that this flour itself has bugs in it. There are bugs from the room. So it's possible there were no bugs in the amount that you took out with your hand to add to the bread. And the second is potentially that they kind of got melted, dissolved into the bread, and there's no actual birya there anymore. Right? It was broken apart. Right. And there's another reason to say this is kosher. Mitam chazaka, because of chazaka. You already filtered out, sifted out this flour before Shabbat. Right? Then it stands on its chazaka, right? When you first did the first sifting of this flour, it was fine. All right. Minan bait bechazaka baduk linyan chametz. Right. We have the same idea of chametz or pesach. I won't get too into that. El sheyesh le'ayen bazeh imashin imseu betoch sha'a achat itra hachasaka odilma lo have riuta v'chein yesh le'ayen eza have chazkat aguf. Okay. And he says, well, maybe though, because in the last hour it now has a new chazaka. It ruined the first chazaka that you found these other bugs or not. He says, and this sarich, but he doesn't give an answer to that. So, but I actually had a situation like this where I actually found some bugs in my flour. They weren't from around the room. I think they were actually inherent to the flour. And then it was like flour I just put in a bread maker, and I didn't find any I went like searching the bread maker around, and I couldn't find any there. But I did find them in the bag, and I found the bottom of the bag was really bad, so I got rid of it. But I was nervous, like, can I keep making this bread or not? So anyway, so I saw this case, and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Not quite the same case, but an interesting case. And it had some good halacha to it. All right, any thoughts or final questions about this, about birya in general? One thing I didn't mention that I just want to throw out is there is a shita out there that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't quote, that gets quoted in the Achronim, and it's also, I think was in the Torah, if I remember correctly, that a birya is actually a batel in 1 in 960. And
The Rashba.
What was that?
I think it's the opinion of the Rashba.
Oh, there's the Rashba. Thank you. Yeah, and so that does, and there is also I don't remember where it is. I didn't get a chance to look. I remember the Aruch HaShulchan has some actually meanings used on stuff in vegetables themselves, but I don't remember what they are. So just to know from like a tachlis again around vegetable stuff. But that's all I have for today. So.
Are we going to get more discussion of vegetables in the Shulchan Aruch, or is this literally all we get for the complete insanity that we have around vegetables?
I don't remember if there's more or not.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I tried to push Ralph Landis on, like some, like, what do you do? And he seemed to essentially say, like, talk to people who are experts, and they'll I seem to think, like, talk to like farmers and how you get rid of vegetables and bugs and vegetables, and they'll tell you. I think that's how I understood him. So unless somebody else understood differently. Okay. Yeah. So, I don't, I wish I had a better answer. No? Okay, great. Anyway, I'll post, thank you. And I'll see everybody next Monday. So, and if you are a Thanksgiving celebrating type person, then may it be a happy one. So, bye everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Joel.